Bram Fisher said that they were going to make a statement from, Mandela was going to make a statement from the dock. The first question is, what happens when you're an accused? What right do you have? What is the state's job that they have to? When you charge with something, what must the state do? What must the prosecution do?
I think you have the right to read your rights as a
Yes.
accused.
Yeah.
Even if you have a right to get a translator
Yeah.
in terms of your rights.
So those are all your rights, right?
Yes.
But there are two very important rights that is part of those rights. Many of those rights were denied under apartheid, but there were many rights that remained. And one of the rights was to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Right? To be presumed innocent until proven guilty. So, if you're presumed innocent until proven guilty, who must prove that you are guilty? The state has to prove, right? And if it's anything like sabotage or a crime, if you're charged by the state and you can go to jail, if it's not a civil case, like suing someone because they said something bad about you, if it is not a civil case, the state must prove, it's a very high standard, beyond reasonable doubt. Have you heard that phrase before? Beyond reasonable doubt. I'm going to show you a few movies. I'm going to show you one movie which is difficult to watch because it's all set in a courtroom and in a jury room. And we've all learned to watch car chases and stuff like that. There's no car chase in it. It's called 12 Angry Men. It was a jury having convicted a young boy of murdering his father. And they had to decide whether he was guilty. But you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt. So if you rely on statements of 3 witnesses in the court, the police rely on 3 statements. You should go and listen sometime to Angie's trial, happening in the High Court now. The state witnesses, if there are 3 state witnesses and they say, I saw Mambadlisa stealing a chicken at the supermarket, right? And one says she had it in a bag, and the other one said, no, she did what my grandmother did when she stole some butter. She hid it there, right, under her shirt. And another one said, no, she had it in her hands. Then what happens? What happens with, is there the same story? It's not the same story. Right? And one says she was already out the door, and another says, no, she was inside the supermarket, and the one says she was standing at the till and paying for a cool drink. Then there's confusion. Is there doubt there that she's guilty?
Yes.
So a lawyer or if she cross-examined the witnesses, would have established that there's doubt. And that means you can't be convicted. Right? So the state has to prove a case, but it has to prove a case beyond reasonable doubt. So it has to have lots of evidence. What Mandela and the Rivonia trialists like Sisulu and Katrada and Bernstein and all those people did is they'd already admitted that they were in MK. So the state doesn't have to prove anything. Right? The state doesn't have to prove anything. They've said we did it.
Okay, that's why the case Oscar, they are trying to get each and every evidence. And
Exactly. So in the case of Oscar, they have to get every bit of evidence, and they have to get it properly. And that's what happens in our police stations now.
Yeah.
They don't write, the person who arrests, they don't write a statement. Now, if you said, I arrested Mabadlisa for the butter, then there's a statement that she was arrested. But if there's no statement that she was arrested, then you can't say that she had anything to do with the butter. So then a case gets thrown out. And that often happens in the police stations in Khayelitsha, in Nyanga, in Manenberg, and so on. They don't write the statement.
But I think now they did get a wake-up call because in December on the 17th, one of the branch members in Biasa was raped.
Yeah.
And investigator Swaya, she tried to collect everything. Even
Yeah.
she
There are
even
many-
take
There are many people.
the statement, and she even take the cell phone for her mother,
Yeah.
just to track the evidence. Oh, I can get it now.
Yeah. So the state has to prove everything. So in the case of Ravonia, the state didn't need to prove anything. The state could have just accepted. But the state wanted to prove that the Ravonia trialists were responsible for all the sabotage, because there were people who'd committed sabotage where people got killed. And they were in a different organization called the African Resistance Movement, ARM. I bet you haven't heard of that one. It was white people like Hugh Lewin and one or two, Eddie Daniels, colored man, and one or two African people. The African people were never caught, so they're not in the history books as much as Lewin and Eddie Daniels. So those people had planted bombs where people got killed. So it's a very different method to what MK did. And Poko, the what became later APLA, also believed in killing people, killing white people, and so on. So that was a difference between the ANC's campaign and ARM and Poko, which became APLA later. So what they didn't plead guilty to was that the ANC and the Communist Party were one thing, and that the communists had control over the ANC. So the state still had to prove those things. That's why there was a trial. Because normally if you say, I did it, there's no trial. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So in a trial, the second right that's vital is that because the state has to prove, does the accused have to say anything? No. You have a right to remain silent. You have a right to remain silent. Okay? So those two rights, that the state has to prove beyond reasonable doubt, and you have a right to remain silent, are fundamental rights in order to have a fair trial. Because otherwise a trial can't be fair. So now, what happens with Ravonia trial? They decide they're going to speak. And there are three types of speaking you can make. One is, at the beginning of the trial, you can make a statement from the dock. And the statement from the dock means you state your case, why you did this. But they can't cross-examine you. They can't cross-examine you. The second is, you become a witness in your own trial. So you go into the box. The statement from the dock is where the accused stand. Becoming a witness is to stand in the witness box or to sit at the witness table. So then what happens? You can be cross-examined by the state. Right? So Oscar is now standing in the dock. But if he is going to give evidence, which I think he might, if he's going to give evidence, he has to go into the box. And Barry Roux will get him to lead his evidence, and Gerrie Nel would be able to cross-examine him on what he says and the evidence that has been led.
I'm trying to catch you. Are you saying even if you are compliant, you can be a witness of your trial?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In any trial, if you make a complaint, you have to prove beyond reasonable doubt that someone, let's say for instance, you say that someone defamed you, right? That they said you were a murderer, right? So you go in to lay the complaint. You have to prove that that person said you're a murderer, and you have to prove why you're not a murderer, why that is untrue, right? Now, most often, to prove why you're untrue, you remember Zuma sued cartoonist Zapiro. He sued Zapiro, right? For the shower on his head, for Lady Justice, for all that stuff, right? Now, if he sued, he had to prove that he didn't have sex with a woman, and he had to prove that he didn't say anything about the shower, right? So if he went into the box, what would happen? He wouldn't be able to say, I didn't say anything about the shower, or I didn't have sex with the woman, right? So what would happen to him then? He'd lose his case. So he withdrew his suing, right? So but Zapiro would have to go into the box. Zapiro would have to go into the box to explain why he drafted, why he made the cartoon. So that would establish the evidence. And Zapiro could be cross-examined on it, right? If Zuma didn't do any of those things, Zapiro would lose his case. But if he did those things, no matter how badly he drew it, even if he showed Zuma naked, right? It would be true. It would be something that we need to know of a leader. We may not like it. None of us would have liked it. But to see Zuma naked, right? But it would be true. And Zuma couldn't sue for that reason. Now, if you're a witness in your own case, then you can be cross-examined. Does that make the principle clear? If you just make the statement from the doc, said, I did this and I didn't do that, I admit stuff, that's it. But if you go into the box to give evidence about aspects of the trial, then it's very different. So they did both. The tactic they adopted was to do both. Now, apartheid was a system of law. It wasn't a system that didn't have law. So there could have been a choice and saying we don't recognize the court and we're not going to say anything. Right? We're not going to participate.
Yeah, I was going to ask that.
They could have said that, right? But the court gives them the right to speak. The law gives them the right to speak. If the state accepts that it's going to use the law to oppress people, and if it has a criminal law that even vaguely, mildly respects the rule of law, then it will use that rule of law, and it means that if you even mildly, you can use it to state your case.